Yeah.
Why would you put him in the room
I
and
don't know.
lock him in a bedroom, a tiny little bedroom with a roided up?
Yeah.
Just stop and think about that. You're in a room smaller than this studio that you and I are in right now with a roided up. You're sleeping with that guy.
Joe Rogan just dropped a bombshell. Jeffrey Epstein didn't just end his own life. He was silenced. And the reason? A vault of blackmail so explosive it could destroy hundreds of the most powerful people on Earth. But here's the twist. Insiders are whispering that Epstein might still be alive, and the FBI's latest leaks make it look like this goes far deeper than anyone imagined. This isn't conspiracy theory, it's conspiracy fact. And the clock is ticking on who gets exposed next. The timing couldn't be worse for the establishment. Thousands of newly unearthed documents, emails, memos, even psychological evaluations have come out through Freedom of Information requests and congressional leaks. They show a jail cell that wasn't just chaotic, it was primed for disaster. Guards asleep at their desks, cameras going dark, logs forged by hand, and a cellmate conveniently removed the day before the tragedy. Epstein's previous attempt was brushed off as a misunderstanding. He told psychologists he had a wonderful life and would be crazy to harm himself. 2 weeks later, he was gone.
Next to the new questions around the investigation into the of Jeffrey Epstein, the accused trafficker stunning the world, taking his own life in a Manhattan jail cell. The official autopsy results just announced by the medical examiner and what his legal team is vowing tonight.
Those records also show the Bureau of Prisons, with its $8 billion budget, collapsing into panic. Within hours, federal prosecutors were demanding answers and getting press releases instead. Internal emails described seriously reduced staffing levels and lack of oversight, as if the most notorious detainee in America had simply slipped through the cracks. And then the agency shut down the entire facility 2 years later, without ever explaining how the most watched man in custody managed to vanish from accountability.
Again, there was new names in some of the emails that I think investigators need to look at. In particular, I jumped on the name of a modeling agent who, in a similar fashion to Jean-Luc Brunel, who brought underage girls from overseas to Jeffrey Epstein for abuse. There was another man. What was interesting about this other individual is that he also apparently provided young models for Donald Trump's modeling agency.
Now, Rogan's claim puts a motive behind the chaos. He says Epstein wasn't just a predator, he was an archivist. According to his sources, the financier had recordings, photos, bank trails, and correspondences tying together politicians, tech billionaires, and global intelligence networks. The new congressional releases back that up. More than 20,000 pages of Epstein's own emails include exchanges with figures like Noam Chomsky, Ehud Barak, Deepak Chopra, Woody Allen, and former White House officials from both parties. The man convicted in 2008 was still socializing, investing, and coordinating meetings with them up until the day of his arrest in 2019. That doesn't sound like exile, it sounds like immunity. We can't ignore how strange his final days were. Records show he bought a radio and headphones, like someone preparing for a long wait rather than a final act. He wrote a letter to Larry Nassar, yes, that Larry Nassar, found later returned to sender after Epstein was gone. He told guards he was calling his mother, who had been gone for 15 years. Every move looked choreographed to confuse, mislead, or maybe signal someone outside. Even the timeline raises eyebrows. The day before his tragedy, 2,000 pages of testimony were unsealed in a separate case naming high-profile associates. The next morning, cameras in the hallway failed, guards skipped 75 mandatory checks, and logs were falsified.
Some breaking news right now. Disgraced financier Jeffrey Epstein has taken his own life while he was behind bars here in New York City. Epstein was facing trafficking charges.
The Justice Department's Inspector General insists it was negligence, not foul play. The report says severe staffing shortages and widespread disregard of policy made Epstein's situation a perfect storm for self-destruction. But the details sound less like negligence and more like coordination. He was allowed to sleep on the floor, surrounded by extra sheets. His phone call went unmonitored, and despite his prior incident, he was kept without a cellmate. Even the officers responsible admitted to fabricating their checklists and walked free under deferred prosecution deals. Meanwhile, the National Enquirer uncovered something darker, a growing list of 22 people tied to Epstein who met mysterious ends in the years following his so-called self-inflicted tragedy. Former associates, accusers, investigators, even journalists. Stephen Hoffenberg, Epstein's one-time business partner, reportedly told friends before his own passing that Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell had filmed compromising videos of elite figures for what he called deep state blackmail. That theory is gaining new traction as emails surface, showing Epstein bragging about having evidence that could take down political leaders. We can see why Rogan's comments are causing panic.
Yeah, I think because this is a big problem. I mean, just related back to what we were talking about earlier with Hollywood too, is that I think a lot of don't respect the public. They don't respect our intelligence. You know, like I think the average American is smart enough to know the difference between somebody that was just in there or somebody that testified than somebody that was banging.
The FBI leaks now confirm Epstein's files included sensitive communications involving Donald Trump, Bill Clinton, and even foreign intelligence contacts. Some of those exchanges have bizarre undertones, Epstein referring to Trump as borderline insane and writing to journalists about images of Trump with guests in bikinis. Others show a man convinced he could use his knowledge to stay untouchable. When prosecutors moved in, that leverage became a liability. The question isn't whether someone wanted him silenced. It's who had the most to lose if he talked. Add to that the unsettling consistency of his post-conviction social life. Congressional documents reveal that even after his 2008 plea deal, Epstein was meeting high-ranking officials, scientists, and celebrities. His calendar lists dozens of dinners with Woody Allen and Soon-Yi Previn, private conversations with Goldman Sachs lawyer Catherine Remler, and repeated travel plans with former Israeli Prime Minister Barak. In April 2019, just 3 months before his arrest, he was still entertaining guests like Steve Bannon and billionaire Peter Thiel. Everyone insists it was professional, but the sheer frequency of contact says otherwise. Those connections didn't dissolve when he was locked up. Some of his visitors in jail were the same people who had dined with him weeks before, and when the story broke, the same figures scrambled to clarify, minimize, or erase their names from the records. Yet, flight logs, appointment books, and now emails tell a consistent story. Epstein's network wasn't shrinking. It was consolidating. He had leverage, and people kept coming back. Then there's the new congressional push to declassify every remaining file in the Department of Justice's possession. The bipartisan Epstein Files Transparency Act is scheduled for a vote within days, and sources on Capitol Hill say pressure is mounting from both the White House and powerful donors to stall it. That alone tells us the stakes. If the full archive goes public, it could reveal decades of connections between Hollywood, politics, and intelligence agencies, all linked through Epstein's operation. Rogan's claim that Epstein might still be alive sounds outrageous until we look at what's missing. No released autopsy photos, sealed surveillance footage, and unexplained delays in the chain of custody for his body.
And I think these things like Epstein, and there's probably a bunch of other similar operations that are being run, they provide you with like a really good time, or maybe you're a high profile, extremely wealthy individual, and it's hard for you to get hosed. And some guy tells you, hey, we've got everything covered. You know, you come to my island, nothing, you know, what happens on the island stays on the island.
Even Ghislaine Maxwell's situation adds fuel. She was quietly moved from a Florida prison to a low-security Texas facility with no active surveillance system. Her family says she's not self-destructive, and her brother warns she has a target on her back. It's the same language Epstein's brother used in 2019 when he called his siblings' tragedy a homicide. We're watching a pattern repeat itself, one where anyone close to the truth seems to vanish or fall silent. The official story says self-inflicted tragedy. The guards say negligence. But the patterns say execution. And if Epstein really is alive somewhere under protection, that changes everything. Because a man with that much leverage doesn't disappear. He gets relocated. And the newest leaks suggest that relocation may not have been the end of the story, but the beginning of something far more dangerous, one that reaches straight into the faces we see on television every single day.
The Maxwell interview is and never was part of the Epstein files. She was sentenced in 2025. This was an interview by Trump's lawyer to protect Trump from the fallout about the Epstein files. What this really is nothing but a sketchy PR stunt by the Department of Justice. And we have seen this movie before. The Maxwell interview is to the Epstein files what the Barr letter was to the Mueller investigation.
Epstein's passing wasn't an isolated event. It was the first domino in a pattern too grim to ignore. Since that August morning in 2019, more than 24 people connected to him have lost their lives under what insiders describe as suspicious circumstances. Lawyers, journalists, accountants. Even his last cellmate, Efrain Stone Reyes, reportedly collapsed just weeks after meeting with FBI investigators. The official cause was natural complications, but few believe that anymore. It looks less like coincidence and more like a cleanup operation still unfolding right now, one quiet accident at a time. Stephen Hoffenberg, the disgraced financier who once mentored Epstein, warned before his own tragedy that the pair had been taping powerful men during private encounters, using underage recruits as bait. His confession, published in his final interview, reads now like a eulogy for the truth. Hoffenberg said Epstein's real fortune didn't come from finance. It came from leverage. He called it a blackmail economy, one where influence was traded like currency. And not long after those words were printed, Hoffenberg was found lifeless in his Connecticut apartment. The body count only climbs from there. 3 women who accused Epstein of exploitation are gone too. Virginia Giuffre, Carolyn Andriano, and Lee Skye Patrick, all reported as self-inflicted tragedies or overdoses. Their names once filled courtroom transcripts and cable news segments, but their ends barely made headlines. It's almost as if their silence served someone's purpose. And in the background, Ghislaine Maxwell, the only surviving insider, was quietly moved from a Florida penitentiary to a low-security Texas facility with no surveillance cameras. Her brother insists she's not self-destructive. We can't help noticing how familiar that reassurance sounds. Each new passing reopens the same wound. Who's cleaning up the loose ends, and what are they protecting? Because the new leaks don't just recycle the same list of high-profile friends. They spell out the depth of Epstein's reach in unnerving detail. Woody Allen's name appears nearly 100 times in Epstein's calendars, paired with dinner notes and flight manifests. Emails show Epstein calling Donald Trump dirty and bragging about knowing how to take him down. Former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak discussed meeting at Epstein's New Mexico ranch. And then there's Bill Clinton, linked to the island through travel records and witness testimony that still hasn't been fully released. The public narrative frames Epstein as an individual predator, but the files tell another story, a network where entertainment, politics, and academia blur together.
Well, Major, I think it reinforced the research that I did on my book that Jeffrey Epstein has always viewed himself as smarter than everybody else, and he also has collected people all along the way, particularly over the 2 decades through his trafficking. And that was always to get secrets and bits of information about individuals that he could pass to other people. He trafficked in this.
Noam Chomsky's emails discuss global affairs and even travel plans to Epstein's Caribbean estate. Deepak Chopra's messages talk about teaching him meditation to manage insomnia. Magician David Blaine, billionaire Peter Thiel, media strategist Steve Bannon each appears in his inbox, all connected by the same invisible thread. Some insist the meetings were professional or philanthropic, but with every new document, the excuses sound thinner. We're staring at a guest list for a global influence club, hosted by a man who shouldn't have had access to anyone after 2008. Congress is finally catching up. A bipartisan vote is scheduled to decide whether the Department of Justice must release every remaining Epstein file.
Thing is, the average American probably can tell the difference, but there are sub-average individuals that all they want to know is you're on the list, and they hear you're on the list, and they might try to tell you. And that is a fact.
Insiders say the White House is quietly pressuring certain lawmakers to pull their names from the bill. The reason, according to one senior staffer quoted by the Los Angeles Times, is that the names are too big to fail. It's not just about embarrassment, it's about destabilization. If the files reveal that heads of state, corporate titans, and cultural icons were being recorded during illicit encounters, the resulting fallout could fracture entire institutions. And if Epstein's original vault still exists, someone out there is using it as leverage right now. What if Epstein's so-called passing wasn't a mistake at all, but a planned illusion? The pattern of coincidences that night reads less like a tragedy and more like an intelligence playbook. Surveillance cameras failed at the exact moment of crisis, guards signed falsified logs, and the autopsy photos remained sealed under security classification. Insiders familiar with counterintelligence operations say this isn't unheard of.
And Stephanie Ramos joining us live. And Stephanie, there have also been more cases filed in court with those accusers attempting to go after potential co-conspirators.
That's exactly right, Whit. 2 more women are suing Epstein's estate. They say they were recruited by an unnamed Epstein employee. Now, this is in addition to the lawsuit filed against Epstein's longtime friend, Ghislaine Maxwell, who is also accused of recruiting for him.
In the past, high-value targets who became political liabilities were quietly extracted, given new identities, and relocated to countries beyond extradition treaties. It's the perfect compromise. Erase the public figure, preserve the asset. We can't ignore how the aftermath fits that template. Within 24 hours, Epstein's body was whisked away, his remains quickly claimed, and no independent confirmation of the autopsy ever surfaced. The Bureau of Prisons shut down the entire facility less than 2 years later, wiping out records and surveillance hardware. Even the staff who worked the night shift were shuffled to new posts or vanished from the federal roster entirely. The pattern looks deliberate, as if someone was scrubbing not just evidence, but memory itself. Then there's the timing, almost cinematic in precision. One day before the so-called self-inflicted tragedy, Epstein's cellmate was removed. One day after that, 2,000 pages of victim testimony went public, exposing names that could shatter governments.
It's layers upon layers. It's those Russian nesting dolls, and you open it, and there's another one in there, and you open, there's another one in there.
Corruptions at all time, bro. The Epstein files.
I heard there's no files. I heard it's a hoax. And then all of a sudden, he's going to release the files. Well, I thought there was no files.
Man,
he wants an investigation now.
Listen.
If you were going to fake an exit, that would be the moment to vanish. The public outrage, the chaos, the flood of speculation. It all creates the perfect fog for a disappearing act. Some former agents even argue that the chaos itself was part of the plan, a psychological operation meant to bury the truth under layers of disbelief. If that's true, then the Epstein is alive theory isn't wild fantasy. It's strategy. Floating his survival keeps the myth alive while disguising the real agenda. Maybe he's gone. Maybe he's watching. Or maybe his name is now just a ghostly code word inside intelligence channels. The point is control. Who holds the secret and who profits from it? Because if Epstein really is still out there, he's not hiding. He's waiting. There's another layer to this. The international connections. Hoffenberg claimed that Epstein had ties to intelligence circles, including Israel's Mossad. That claim once sounded fringe, but the emails show Epstein coordinating with foreign officials and discussing global risk portfolios that look nothing like normal business.
The idea that there would be a list does defy common sense for any common criminal. Why would you maintain your own evidentiary criminality? But to Jason Chaffetz's point, that doesn't mean there aren't clients. Just because there might not be a list doesn't mean there are not clients. And Ghislaine Maxwell could be put to the test on naming the names, creating the list after the fact of people that she saw.
When we combine that with the sudden disappearance of physical evidence, missing tapes, sealed hard drives, vanished financial ledgers, it starts to look like espionage wrapped in scandal. Epstein wasn't merely entertaining the elite. He was gathering information, and perhaps someone else inherited that archive after he vanished. The pattern of strange ends surrounding his associates keeps the fear alive. Joe Recaray, the Palm Beach detective who first pushed the Epstein case in 2005, passed unexpectedly before the 2019 revelations. Movie producer Steve Bing, who had spoken with the FBI about Epstein's connections, plunged from a Los Angeles high-rise in 2020. Mark Middleton, a former Clinton advisor tied to Epstein's foundation records, was found hanging and shot in Arkansas in 2022, officially labeled self-inflicted. The coincidences read like a script no one dares to film. And then there's the celebrity silence. The same people once photographed on Epstein's jets or private terraces now act as if he never existed. Woody Allen avoids questions. Deepak Chopra deflects. Chomsky dismisses reporters with, "None of your business." But denial only fuels curiosity. The public wants to know, if this man's power faded with him, why does his shadow still stretch across the most guarded corners of government and entertainment? We're at the tipping point. Every new leak tightens the circle and every sudden tragedy shrinks it. Epstein's demise was convenient. The cover-up was sloppy, and the bodies keep appearing. Yet the biggest mystery isn't how he disappeared. It's who's still protecting what he left behind. Because if this was a hit job, the orchestrators didn't retire. They're still operating, still watching, maybe still recording. And if that vault ever surfaces, it won't just ruin reputations. It could rewrite modern history. So we have to ask, who do you think is pulling the strings now? The billionaires? The politicians? Or someone we haven't even seen yet? Tell us what you believe in the comments, because this story isn't over. It's only getting darker. Until next time, stay awake, stay questioning, and remember, power never fades quietly.